Welcome to the Digital Crisis PR podcast from K&L Gates, hosted by Desiree Moore. In each episode, we aim to help you proactively plan for and manage any digital crisis situation. Recognizing that today's digital world demands a multifaceted approach, our team tackles your crisis head-on, letting you get back to business.
Always easier to fix the roof in the dry season instead of in the downpour. And what would you advise clients about how to prepare for the downpour during the dry season when it comes to major public controversies?
I love this question because it gives me the opportunity to sort of pitch what I'm, always kind of pitching or preaching to my close clients, which is let's prepare in advance. Yes, I can help you if your house is on fire. I'll get you out. We'll put the fire out. We can do it. But I would much rather be in a position where, one, we've prevented the fire, or two, we are set up and ready to go, ready for whatever crisis might come our way. It's almost inevitable nowadays, right? It's not a matter of if, but when a crisis will hit. And I think in some ways, given recent events, clients are more and more convinced of this, right? A global pandemic that no one would have predicted, or I guess many people actually did, in fact, predict, but it wasn't top of mind and it wasn't at the forefront of our day-to-day operations, right? Equally, a social movement that is driving really significant change that has been years and years in the making, but the power and engagement that we've seen around these social movements has inspired companies to make big changes quickly, right? So I think more and more clients are understanding that being prepared for whatever may come next is critical. And so what do you do to prepare? How is it that you prepare? And there are a number of different ways, but I find that it's very effective to come to the table and think about a handful of key crises for your particular organization or your industry, right? And it's unique to every client. It's unique to every entity. Depending on your industry, you might not want to articulate them specifically if you think the SEC is going to come knocking and, ask to see, paperwork you've prepared. And you don't want to look like you were preparing for a specific crisis that then arises. But, right, think about what it is in your industry that would cause enough disruption to your business operations or to your public-facing image or to the morale of your employees. Articulate those and then think about how you will address them if they arise, right? And that includes an incident response plan where we think about who the key people at the company are who are going to jump in if there's an issue. Are we going to notify law enforcement? Are we going to, prepare some sort of a rubric so we understand what regulatory agencies we might need to respond to? Are we going to have to make a disclosure in a 10K? What do each of these events trigger for your specific company? And let's start writing them out. If it's, a high profile employee separation, what are we going to put in a 10K? Of course, you're going to have to tailor the communications when the event actually occurs. You'll have to fill in those key facts that you and I always talk about, right? Getting your hands around the facts, understanding the law, and communicating with the right messaging or the right feeling around the facts and the law. But taking those things into account in advance really gives you a strong, kind of push in the moment, right? You're so much better prepared if you've taken time to think about what your key crises might be, how you're going to respond, who your, key kind of team, your core team is going to be, and then training your core team, doing tabletop exercises so that the first time someone sees the incident response plan, it's not in the middle of the incident. That doesn't really do you any good. It doesn't give you enough of a leg up. So preparing as though you have experienced each of those key crises is critical. And then having that written plan so we can pull it out, we can, flip through it. We know who our media contact is at the company. We know what our social media plan is going to be in the wake of any crisis. And two other things that come to mind. One is that it gives you an opportunity to think about your core values, irrespective of the crisis, irrespective of the serious legal implications that we often see with our clients. in the face of a crisis, if you are clear on your core values, you can always circle back to that. That is always a valid response in the face of a crisis, whether in a public facing way or internal communications to your employees, or even in a regulatory context. You want to say, yes, we've had this incident and we know it's reportable. This is what our organization stands for. And this is why we are going to recover, or this is why we are going to partner with you, Health and Human Services, or Attorney General of the state of Idaho, right? Whatever it may be, to help get you answers so that we can give you comfort around how this occurred, what we've done to remediate, and how we're going to move forward in compliance, right? So even those little preparations in advance will help you respond to a crisis in a timely manner, in a way that aligns with your company values, and then in a way that doesn't require a lot of fixing or explaining, right? If you, again, in the face of a crisis, of course, we can do the same, but you're more likely to make even little missteps because you haven't had the opportunity to plan. And the one last thing that I'll say about the plan, because I think it's so critical, it also helps you recognize when something isn't a crisis. And we see that misstep with clients a lot. Something will happen that is not necessarily small, right? We're not devaluing the incident, but it's not going to impact your bottom line, or it's not going to, displace your employees or affect business operations in the way that you might think at the outset. If you haven't gone through that exercise of key crises for your industry and for your company, you might fall for that red herring and issue a statement or notify a regulator and then realize, oh, actually, I don't know, I'm not a covered entity under HIPAA, so this medical record really wasn't critical, or, right, whatever it may be. We see all types of missteps because clients tend to panic, understandably. And then again, this is where counsel can come in and say, okay, right, but are there any implications? Is there any harm? Will there be a lawsuit? Are you required to notify any regulatory agency? Right? If you've done that in advance, it saves you the heartache of even that false alarm, which can cause as much consternation and disruption in your day-to-day operations as a real crisis if you haven't had the opportunity to think through, what is a crisis for my organization? Who's going to deal with it? How are we going to deal with it? And how are we going to talk about it in the event that it does occur?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Digital Crisis PR Podcast from K&L Gates. For more information or to receive updates about our podcast, drop us a line at dcpr@klgates.com. Be safe out there. Until next time.